Hey guys, it's the Gundam Boy, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Lumber Mech versus the Patriot, Flamethrower versus Gatling Gun, Anti-Tank Cannon versus Rocket Launcher, the one that costs super credits or the one that comes free with your level 25 certification. Now, before we continue, I gotta say, this isn't one of those videos where I go, one's completely a piece of shit garbage F-tier weapon. You're in the wrong channel for that kind of stuff. And just a brief warning to everybody who may have epilepsy, because the Patriot is the epitome of a seizure. I'm just saying you might end up like this guy at the end of the video. But today we're going to be taking a look at their weapons and how they fare in each field of battle, and compare the two. However, we'll have to keep in mind, no armor comparisons as they're exactly the same. So most of the focus is going to be on their armaments. And yes, we'll also have to keep in mind the Flamethrower is not working properly. I seriously don't know how they missed this. Let's start off with the Lumberer. Its flamer weapon is basically the Cremator, with a standard fire damage of 100 and its tick damage is at 3. This is the Lumber's main way of defending itself against enemies that get too close, but it basically functions like your typical Flamethrower. Burn them! And the reason why I say it's basically Cremator is, well, because it is, even down to the ammo, as they both have 500 capacity, with both of their damage output being practically the same, with both of them running out of ammo at the same rate. But the Cremator can pee harder, as it has a little bit more range. But this can be hard to read, as the mech's camera angle doesn't exactly do it justice, which is perfect for the mech, as Flamethrowers need that distance to cook enemies. Then we have its cannon, which has that damage output of 1,300 with a AP level of 6. It also has 150 explosive tacked on, with a fair blast radius of 6 meters. And you also get 25 rounds in this cannon, which is this mech's defensive weapon against heavier units. And the great thing about it is that this weapon's projectile speed is really high, which allows for instant damage. So, with that out of the way, let's take a brief look at the Patriot's weapon systems, as we're already familiar with this guy. And of course we have the seizure-inducing Gatling Gun, which has 90 standard damage and a durable of 23, with medium pen, which it has around 1,350 bullets, with a fire rate of 1,200 RPM. And this is the mech's main counter against chaff units. Then moving on to the infamous rocket pods, which have a damage output of 1,250 with a armor pen of 6, with a bit of tacked on explosive damage at 400, which is the mech's counter against heavier units. I have to say, between these two mechs, they're actually fairly similar. But the only way to identify the difference between mechs and helldivers too is based off their weapons. You're gonna find that comparing both the Lumber and the Patriot are pretty hard. Not because they're two completely separate weapons, but because they feel very similar to each other. This all lies in their combat role. Like, look at the Lumber. It has long range, it's an anti-tanker with a close range flamer that's anti-chaff. Then you have the Patriot, which does some of the same combat roles, but at a closer range. Let's start with the Flamer and the Gatling Gun. Going up against light chaff, which is basically any enemy that dies in a fart, the Lumber mech excels in killing these enemy units, as easily as sweeping left or right. The Lumber is great at being an anti-swarmer, and with its wide range and basically being a Cremator, you can sweep this thing across the field and take battle control almost instantly. However, if you're going up against healthier enemy units, you're not going to only want to rely on the Flamer, because they have more armor and health than you ever will. And since it's a flame weapon, you have to rely specifically on the time to cook, which makes this a less reliable weapon on something like the bot front, not because the damage output is bad, but because you have to close the distance against enemies with light armor. This is mostly a problem on the bot front, since, you know, they have guns. However, this isn't nearly as big of a problem for the Patriot, and while it's not nearly as accurate at long ranges, the Gatling Gun can at least put enough lead down to cover you. And since you don't have to rely on cooking your enemies to death, you actually get a much quicker kill time for certain chaff units. Because, whereas the Flamer takes some time to cook your enemies, bullets are very easy, as all you'd have to do is point and, but that doesn't mean the Flamethrower is anywhere near bad. But let's talk about the anti-tank weapons, because I think we know who's the winner. Don't get me wrong, I love the Patriot, but the missile's so slow that the spear beat me to it. The cannon on the Lumber is just too hard to beat, instantly hitting targets with precision. And in some firefight situations, you can't wait for your missile to hit the target, whereas the cannon can apply it now. Like, look at the travel time from the cannon to the building. That's a lot of speed. The Patriot can rock its missiles at close to middle range. The slow, weighty projectile of the Patriot's missiles just make it much more challenging to use. But we'll hold off on the comparisons there, as we're going to take a look at how this mech fares on all the fronts, starting with the bugs, which, if you couldn't guess, ends with most bugs getting blasted by a large wall of fire. This mech was built for the bug front, and you can see in the time it took for me to deal with the entire bug breach by myself that I basically chaffed through all these bugs. 78 kills, with a decent amount of ammo still remaining. And looking at that chonker of a cannon, it takes 2 shots to kill something like a charger to the head, which is exactly the same against something like the Bile Titan, taking very little effort to kill this guy. So yeah, right off the back, the Lumber smashes the bug front. And just like the bugs, the Illuminate doesn't fare too well against it either. It seems that squidifying a bunch of citizens didn't actually help the Illuminate in this this case. That includes the Overseers. Turns out a ballad of armor doesn't help if you're being roasted inside it, and when your mainline heavy unit is the Harvester, one of the lightest armored enemies you can face off with, the Lumberer just steamrolls through these guys as well. Assuming you don't punk a shell into a flesh mob's face, with the Flamer by itself, they can eat up a lot of ammo and take up a lot of time when it comes to killing, but if you're not afraid to spend some of your rounds, fire an anti-tank shell into their back. They'll like it. But going up against the Illuminate, yeah, they join the bugs and getting flattened. Then we have the bots, which push the mechs to their extreme already, which they provide the weirdest threat that the mech could deal with, and it's mid-range combat. Let's say you're the Lumber going up against a rocket dev. You can't hit him with your flamethrower because he's outside of your effective range, which means your only option is to either close the distance or fire your anti-tank at them. You have to close the distance on these enemies if you really want to get the flamethrower on them, which means you're in shooting distance of them. While the legs have gotten stronger, the arms are still pretty weak, which means closing in that distance can run the risk of losing your arm. Utilizing cover is going to be very important for this mech, and you're going to soak in a lot of damage as you need to be up close with this flamethrower. Going up against heavies, this cannon can absolutely shred apart things like Factory Striders, allowing you to rival them at long range. You're like an angrier version of the Flamer Hulk. So while it stomps through the bugs and the Illuminate, it actually has a challenge against the bots. So going back to the Patriot versus Lumberer, both of these mechs against the Illuminate and the bugs basically stomp it out. No one really has the edge in terms of performance here, and only really outperform each other in small ways. Like the Patriot has no struggles killing Watchers, but if the Lumber wanted to kill it, well, you better pray it doesn't snitch on you before then, or pray that you can hit your anti-tank round on it. And while the Gatling gun on the Patriot can instantly put down bugs with its rapid fire, the Lumber mech can do it just by simply looking left and right. Otherwise, it's basically a toss. You can take either of these mechs on each of these fronts and perform pretty well. Even though I like the Lumber on the bots, I would still prefer the Patriot, as mid-range combat's pretty common, because the biggest threats aren't usually the heavy units you face off with. Yes, they do one-shot you, yes, they can break your mech really bad, but it's a saturation of light arm fire that you're not paying attention to that really can doom your mech. Patriot just has that nice flexibility with its Gatling gun, even if it's not heavy pen. So I'd have to say, between the two of these mechs, I like them both. They just need to fix the Lumber's flamethrower, and I think that'd be great. If they gave these mechs heavier armor, it would do the Lumber mech wonders on the bot front. I am still praying we get heavy pen Gatling gun. So between the two of these mechs, which one's your guys' favorite? And the answer's wrong, it's the Breakthrough.
You never see it coming.